Hello, I am Radagast at your service. And so we're going to talk about the importance of human psychology. Little bit different than the original talk. I was kind of about the psychology of power that might get into it a little bit. But a lot of times when I start to write out the concepts I'm going to work on, sometimes I write down the ideas during a very intense kind of, sometimes I guess they call them downloads. I don't really like that word so much. There are certain states of consciousness you enter and you kind of get a big picture of things. And when I wrote down the things for the psychology of power, I was in a state that I'm not in anymore. But psychology, the human psychology is real, because even the psychology of power is about human psychology and the importance of human psychology. And to me, the importance of human psychology is probably most important for us to look at it kind of from two angles or two levels. And one would be how psychology is used against us by people who work with our media and other ways of opinion forming. Because opinion forming is to get into our heads, and to get into our heads is to get into our psychology. And then the other really important part of human psychology is people really finally kind of coming to understand what their software is in many ways. To understand how a human works is to I think it's best to kind of think of it in a way of software, only because we run programs. And so the programs, the programming is different in psychology. Imagery and words are the programming language, as opposed to synthetic programs which use code. And that's not to say that words aren't code in their own way, and they very much are. I mean, I think there's a lot to be understood about ourselves if we look at how we constructed our software, and especially just even things with folders. One of the really powerful things of thinking about software is the delete button or the copy and edit button. Only because rather than having hard opinions that get you stuck, I find it much more valuable to that any even of the quote unquote dogmas I have. And I made a tape almost a year ago about flexible dogma, dynamic flexible dogma, and that's based on when you kind of write a narrative for yourself that you might like it and say this works for me, but you always kind of remember that you can edit it. You can go in there, take parts out, rewrite it, or you can delete it. And knowing that flexibility that we have allows us to kind of stay out of being locked in, or even closed-minded. Because it's like, oh, don't tell me that I'd have to do a whole bunch of new thinking. And actually, very often, you really don't have to. You might have to do a whole bunch of thinking. You might just have to hit the delete button and accept the new information. Not really difficult stuff. Although I tend not to throw out babies with the bathwater. Sometimes a belief system is like a baby with the bathwater, and then ultimately you find out the baby has quite a lot of value, but the bathwater does need to be changed, dumped, or whatever. But getting back to the importance of human psychology, the reason why it's important is because the current state of the world is largely the product of psychological management of the people by governments. And of course it would make sense, because the word government really means mind. Govern the mind. So governments are really mind governors. And I think something I mentioned in my last video about hate or fear is often generated to create an other, and that creating of an other is usually done by a government. And again, it's a mind program. It's not to say that in all cases there are no threats, but in most cases the threats are overblown. So, and I really feel with all the news that's coming out, and how, just how we conduct ourselves. We really have to start looking inside, looking in the mirror, but most importantly, looking inside, looking in our hearts, and starting to fix the psychological dysfunction that that, in my opinion, is holding the human race back from going to its next phase. The awakened phase, the what I have referred to as us becoming the sages of the galaxy. And we're not going. You cannot really be a sage and truly wise whilst emotionally dysfunctional. And prejudices and prejudice is not a good word. It's really all tied in with the fear and anger and hate of others, and then of course sometimes those same processes get turned onto ourselves. But really, it's the let's take a place like the United States, and the incredible dysfunction and most likely, without even being exaggerating, criminality of the way the government works. And then the still large portion of the population that refuses to see that. If somebody said, well, what would be your evidence that, people are, still falling for things? I would say, how about interest in things like the debates? It's one thing to want to watch a freak show, but people watch the debates to kind of see what's going on in politics rather than realizing that they're looking at a panel of sociopaths minimally. Some of them are walking into psychopath territory, but they're all sociopaths, and they're all unfit for duty. But people do not see that, and that's their psychology that's preventing that. And so I really see that one of the things holding back all of humanity is the fact that they haven't really gotten to levels of self-examination and especially how they feel about things. Because the average person has average intelligence and works much more from their gut than their facts. And of course, if you're relying on mainstream media, coming by facts is an increasingly difficult thing to do. So they're really to break free and get to the next level. People are going to have to come to grips with the fact that they still have a lot of work to do, and getting unstuck where they are stuck. And people usually get stuck emotionally. Again, getting back to average intelligence. So a lot of people, rather than think their way through things, there's no question that they do thinking. I'm not saying, we're not talking about having no mental capacity. But an average mental capacity very often is almost on an equal par with the emotional level. And of course, the emotional level is what I call the reactive part of the deeper and, to me, the very rich part of our feeling. Our gut, when our gut communicates to us, our gut doesn't communicate in emotions, our gut communicates in feelings. And, that ties in both with the second chakra and also the fact, at least, and I might have mentioned this before, most people know that a healthy gut, a healthy intestinal tract is loaded with lots of good bacteria. And at basic levels, at levels that we often don't accept, there's much of the animal kingdom of which bacteria would fall into in most cases that are very psychic. And in certain cases, I think like bacteria do not have a psychological concept of time. So they live outside time. And by living outside time, that means that they kind of straddle what we call past, present, and future. So being as the all organisms have a program to stay on living. So therefore, they also have a way of perceiving what is what's an unsafe environment or what's not good for moving forward in an uncomplicated and undamaging way. So what we have in the way of millions of year old symbionts, which the bacteria live in our guts are people who are as invested in our well-being as we are, and actually free of some of the dysfunctional psychology of human beings. In many cases, the bacteria in our gut can actually think. And again, they don't have a third chakra, so they don't think, but they're informed. They have information that they can process that they get from their environment, and much of that is in the form of frequencies. And so much of intuition, much of the feeling from your gut, in my opinion, comes from the gut bacteria. I think that the modern diet that is, and especially with the overuse of antibiotics that wreak havoc on all bacteria in our body, but especially our gut bacteria, I'm increasingly under the impression that many people do not have good gut health. And because they don't have good gut health, they don't have the information at a deep feeling level from that aspect of their being. The second chakra will still give them some information, but I really believe the second chakra and those gut bacteria work hand in hand with each other. If in many ways them not feeding the information in there. But because there's a part of our a symbiont that lives with us, that lives outside time and basically can read the future, so to speak. The feelings from our gut are from those organisms that are within us that can give us advanced information, which is so if somebody is all smiley and very friendly looking and you're going, oh, this is a nice guy, but if you check in with your gut and it's not a nice person, your gut will tell you something's not right here. I mean, you may not be able to fine tune exactly what you're getting there, but you will get a clear signal. Something's not good here. And that's a signal to pay attention. Doesn't mean that you need to dismiss, but you become a little more cautious in your interactions with said person. So we kind of get to, again, the working out where we get stuck. Now, of course, what I call the emotional level the next level up from feelings, where data from feelings, rather than being examined by the mind for what information or data is there, to me the in-between level is the more emotional level, where often feelings arise, are not examined, and they just go into motion, an emotion. And that's where, and fear comes in, but so does anger, so does jealousy, a whole range, and so does happiness, a whole range of emotions. And it's not so important for us to examine the more positive emotions because they don't create problems in our life. But a lot of the more negative emotions can kind of create problems. So, and that's why sometimes you want to be aware that there needs to be a dialogue between how you feel and then having your mind kind of check in with those feelings and asking them, well, why do you feel like that? It's not just, oh, I feel this way. Well, let's find out, like, I feel afraid. Where's the fear coming from? It's just one example. But we really as a species have to kind of get back into the tools of self-examination, because it's through examination we find the bugs in our software. And it's by unbugging that software that we get some clarity, and it's with that clarity that we can then look at the world that we live in and get a real assessment of what's going on. The biggest problem on the planet right now is the species. Huge swaths of the species are clueless of what their environment really is. The data that they need to really give them a clear picture of what their environment is not functioning properly. And again, some of that has to do with that their psychology is being messed with. But part of how we kind of stop that interference is by understanding that we're being interfered with. It's almost like if somebody's using a certain kind of verbal trick or dialectical trick that they've learned, and it allows them to kind of get, up on a conversation because it's a trick. And then you see that trick, well, that trick doesn't work anymore. And so the psychology of power has a lot to do with, again, the government, the people who want to govern our minds, using narratives to shape our worldview and to kind of give us packets of presets of feeling almost like feeling presets. Again, when we're talking about software, sometimes you go into a program and it can do a lot of things, and there's all kinds of things you can tweak, but there's also a submenu of somebody's already gone in there and given you presets that create different conditions with the same controls. And much of what the media does is create presets and sets of presets. And so, like, Fox News will give you different presets than CNN will. So it's kind of like presets for an already, by choosing where you get your news, you have already been psychologically profiled. And so presets are written for you for that particular subset of psychological profiling. And in many ways, what they're practicing is the art of power. And so just kind of coming from a metaphysical, mystic view, or a wizard's view, the whole, what they're really doing is they're weaving spells on people. Words are how, spellings of words and words are how spells are really done. I mean, the most effective spells are worked on a person through words and creating a psychological space. The idea of somebody going, somebody in a room, like some witch or Wiccan going in there and reading a spell book and, and lighting the right candles and saying those words. I guess, again, that, in a quantum field, you will have some impact there. But the real spell weaving is done from a person creating a certain way of bringing ideas out, going into somebody's head. The real weaving of a spell is done on people by words or written material. And in which case, things are spelled out. I'm not the first person to point to this. I mean, I've certainly seen many videos that use this. It wasn't where I learned it, but I'm just trying to say I'm certainly not the first person to come out with this concept. And so really what we have in the way of these psychologically dysfunctional aspects of people is that many of them are under a spell. And it is through examining ourselves that we break that spell. And really to get to the next level of where we all need to go as a species, we have to become psychologically functional. We are currently, as a species, and as far as the group dynamic goes, we're psychologically dysfunctional. And much of regaining our psychological functionality comes from starting to understand who you are as a sovereign, who you are as a created being. I mean, part of the psychological dysfunction is our being cut off from what we know. I mean, written laws, anybody who kind of comes into their sovereign being and starts to understand their heart understands that written laws are really bogus. You want to have societal contracts and agreements, but written laws that are just kind of cold, and this is something I think I've probably mentioned in my videos in the past, don't work. But they're necessary when people are not informed by their heart and are emotion and are dysfunctional as a species, largely because we are an animal, and what differentiates us from the animals is our psychology, which of course is part of our frontal cortex, our cerebral cortex. And so we really have to be more inward looking, because that's where the problems are. I mean, the problems in certain cases are originating outside of us, But we, to address those outside issues, we start inside, because we have to be able to see what's being done to us to be able to stop it. It's kind of hard to stop being abused if you don't understand you're being abused, or think your abuse kind of comes with a package. And it's through sovereignty and understanding your sovereignty and your connection to God that you realize that all abuse is unacceptable under the universal God law, human law, whatever you want, the law of the heart. Abuse is unacceptable. And so the reason I can't, this is going to be a relatively short video, but one of the reasons I want to get to is because when I look, I'm in Global Mission of Peace. We have a mission to try and make a more peaceful, humanitarian, and functional world. And we still operate in a relatively small group, largely. But what makes our group powerful is when we get together, we can talk about everything, because we're a grouping of people who the rest of our friends and families all think we're weirdos or conspiracy theorists or whatever else. But weirdo is a good enough overall term. And then we come together, and there's no weirdos. There's unique personalities, and people come with a lot of differences, but overall there's a similar view of the world. And when I just look at it, when I look at how we're going to move forward, I see the biggest obstacle is psychology. Victim psychology is a huge part of it. Where people view themselves as victimized rather than empowered beings who need to do something to stop being abused. Because you're abused doesn't necessarily make you a victim. It makes you abused. Victim is, I'm not trying to say there is no such thing as a victim, but there's a victim psychology. And victim psychology is a big part of victim psychology is when you blame other people for what's happening to you. Because then you are demonstrating that you're a victim of something else, as opposed to the fact that you're really just kind of unaware of being manipulated. You're being manipulated, which is a form of abuse, and the only person who can cut those strings is you. The only person who can cut those puppet strings is you. But you have to be aware of the strings to even think of cutting them. So I just really, this little short talk is just to kind of hold anybody who's stuck in any kind of anger, fear, or hate. Those are unexamined feelings, and it's only through examination of them that you can get past the fear, the hate, the anger. Even other emotions. I mean, like jealousy. I wanted to say lesser emotions, but jealousy and envy feed in a lot to some really ugly behavior. And again, that it's really through the heart connection and understanding why we are not content with our life. Envy is really looking at another's life and going, oh, that's the life I want their life. Almost like you want to take their life, and if you can't have it, you don't want them to have it either. And then jealousy is really psychosis when it really gets loose. And so these are the kind of things we need to get out of our way to be able to have an honest dialogue with each other. And it's only through dialoguing with each other and finally coming to some kind of consensus by knowing what's important and what's individual and might not be important to the group, to be able to know the difference between what your own sovereign self, what you need for, and then your society at large, and how society is a little more general. And you need to know those lines, like what's your privacy, where's your boundary in your private life, and what's your kind of social life, what are your responsibilities. What are your responsibilities to society? And one of the most important responsibilities is like having a job. Being a member of society is like being part of a team. I don't like the word job. And as a member of that team, you're expected to show up sober, well-rested, emotionally stable. Really, and if any place you work, you're working with other people and you're on a team, if somebody shows up and they haven't slept well enough, they're hungover, They come in high or drunk. They come in after a bad argument with a significant other. These people are not, they don't function properly, and even that whole psychological atmosphere about them is kind of disturbing. And it's kind of, we owe it to each other to be as miserable as we want in our private lives. But when we step forward and we step into the commons, so to speak, or where we have to work together, we really owe it to each other to show up in good shape. Now, it's not to say occasionally, if you can't manage that, what you do is you show up in the best shape you can, and then you let other people know what kind of shape you're in, and you show up the best you can, and then you seek. If you need something from other people, you speak it. People shouldn't have to come over and kind of pull it out of you. If you need help from your fellow human being, speak your truth. Be heard. Let them know. If you think there's anything that another person can help you with, let them know. The average person actually wants to help another person. There's great satisfaction and joy in being able to hear the call and answer it and make a difference. And because, once again, every time one of the team members is down a little bit and you bring them back up, the team is stronger. And we, as a species, humanity is meant to be a team, and that's what we're trying to build, a team. Because as a team, we can have the world we want. We can solve the problems that we see. We can be creative. We can play together. Okay, I think 26 minutes. I'm gonna call that a show. If any of you have been following the Mystic View, you know that I've put a song that I wrote, True Vision of Peace, Global Mission of Peace, and in a full mix version with choir type stuff and guitars and things. But my friend Joseph Butch Robbins, who is actually a banjo player of some considerable renown in the bluegrass world, and it's funny for me to say that because he and I are both not fans of genres, but genres were created, so he worked in a genre, and so this he played a banjo part. He actually ties in because I'm going to be interviewing him for a Mystic View. I really want people to get to know Joseph Butch Robbins before he reemerges, so to speak. But I had asked him for a banjo part that I wanted to drop into the song. And he gave me this virtuoso performance of a banjo, this virtuoso banjo performance and especially because he had used the full song to kind of write his parts from. So when having the skills that he has, when he played back his banjo part, it had almost every you could hear the voices in it. You could hear the piano parts in it. You could hear some of my vocal parts and some of my guitar cues. I mean, he just pulled all these melodies out of the bigger song and played it in his own style. And so I think what I'll do with this one is I made a mix where it's just me singing, me playing bass, him playing banjo, my automatic drummer in the background, and and that little bit of guitar work that I used to kind of get that bagpipe sound. But it's a really different version, so I'm just going to include it here because I'm mentioning it. You might want to listen to it. I'm going to give you the SoundCloud link, and like I said, Joseph Butch Robbins will be a guest on a Mystic View in the very near future. Okay, so that will conclude this show, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Right now, I've been doing it about once a week. I want to get up to 2 times a week, but GMOP does keep me a little bit busy. And to do these tapes right, I have to get in the right mental space. And if I'm at all ragged or weary and stuff, it doesn't really set itself up for the kind of channels I need to open up in myself to give a decent show. So anyway, basically the Mystic Views have been coming out on Sunday nights. This is now Sunday. Well, it's 4:43 Sunday morning, so I guess it's technically Monday, but for me, it's still Sunday night. And so I'm going to hopefully move them up to 2 times a week, if God willing, as I sometimes say. But speaking of God, let me just say God bless you, and see you all next time. It's been Mystic View. Thank you.